So I'm going to show you how I teach my students to paint and draw little people. I've got some little tips and hacks that are very useful to give you confidence to draw and paint people so that you can put them in your paintings without worrying about them looking wrong, because I've got a really good secret hack that I use with my students when they go a little bit wrong. It's usually with the size of the heads. I've got a really good solution for that without any rubbing out. So, shall we get started? I thought I'd share with you one of my great inspirations is Sir Hugh Casson. He was the president of the Royal Academy in London. I just love his sketches of people and buildings in pen and wash. So if you get a chance to get hold of one of his books, he's got quite a few, I'd really recommend them. But I'm going to try to channel a little bit of his drawing and painting of people in this tutorial as well. So I'm going to start off with a horizon line, which is quite an important line in a composition for a painting or a drawing, especially if you want to include people. So here are a few do's and don'ts. What I would say is on a lot of street scenes and things like that, you'll have a horizon line, and it's a useful line, especially if you use linear perspective, but also if you draw people. And what I always say to my students is try to have all the heads of people on or around the horizon line. They don't all have to be spot on the horizon line, but just around the horizon line. And that way they look like they're in perspective. You saw I scribbled out someone there as well. They were too high up. It looked wrong. So straight away, if it looks wrong, it's usually because their heads are too far up or too low down the horizon. You can see here I'm sketching in people sort of above and below the horizon there, and it doesn't look quite right. And that's usually the reason why. So no matter how big or small the people are, try and keep their heads on or around the horizon line. So I'm just sort of sketching in a street scene here, using a little bit of linear perspective. I'm going to do the same here, and it won't look quite right. And that's usually the reason. If you were on a cliff top looking down on people, it's a completely different scenario. But on a street scene, especially using 1 point perspective, you want your heads around the horizon. The only time that's different if it's someone sitting down or lying down, or children, which obviously are going to be much, much lower. A useful thing is what I'm doing here is drawing a sort of an ellipse around the horizon area that can help you to place the heads in a good place on the horizon. So that's my first tip. My second tip concerns the heads of the little people. It's where most people go wrong, actually, and it's sometimes hard to see. So I'm going to point it out, and when I point it out, it's easier to see. I've been teaching beginners in watercolour and drawing for years, and this is what happens most of the time. They draw the body in, the legs in really well, and the head, it's almost like a spaceman's sort of helmet. It's round and it's big. And I always say to my students, draw it really, really small, the head, because you can always go bigger. But when you've gone big, it's much harder to go smaller. So that's tip number 2. Really draw a small head. You can always, as I'm gone here, you can go bigger. It's easier. But when you've gone bigger, it's so much harder to go smaller. But I have got a hack later to show you how you can remedy that. So watch this space. My next tip is quite an interesting one. It's all about the features. So definitely don't draw or paint facial features. You can do sort of shadows on the face to give a little impression, but try to minimize all the features. So I usually say, again, I always say to my students, no facial features, no hands, no feet, no neck. I know that sounds really weird, but for little people, you don't need to see all this information. I'm sort of sketching in hands and facial features and feet here. But you don't need this to create an impression. If someone looks at your painting or drawing, their mind makes up all the information that isn't there. Their imagination can fill in the blanks. And so I'm just sketching in a person here. Remember, small head. And I'm not going to draw any neck, any hands or feet. And it can still look like a person. especially a small person in a painting. So I hope this encourages you. You don't have to do all these tricky things to actually create the illusion of a person in a painting. So I hope you found this tip number 3 helpful. No hands, no feet, no facial features, and no neck. So I hear you saying, well, how do I draw these people, these little people? Well, here's how I would suggest and what works for me. So remember, the horizon line is quite important if you've got lots of different people in the distance and things like that. So sketch in your horizon line. My first very small person on the horizon, the one really in the distance, you can just do a lowercase letter I. So a little dot for the head and just a line, just a bit longer than the letter I there. And after you do that, you can actually put a little cast shadow as well. It grounds the people, stops them looking like they're floating. So make sure you've always got your shadows. Everyone's got the shadows on the same side. My next person is like a carrot. So there we are. I've done a bigger one here for you. So you've sort of got the carrot shape and then have it crossing at the bottom. So you've got that look of legs with, again, a very small head. There are no arms here at all. These people are way off in the distance. You don't need to paint any details at all here. You're going to blob in a little bit of watercolour afterwards. So it's just going to be an impression as well. So just practice that as well. It's quite good fun to do and very effective. So my next person here is like an arched window, and I've sort of stick out an elbow. I'm giving this person a bag. I'm already getting carried away here, but I've got a W, a long W for legs. One is slightly shorter than the other, so it looks like they're walking. It's always good to have people that look like they're walking. It really adds life to your painting. And these are kind of the middle distant people, and the little carrots and the letter I are the sort of distant people. So what I'm doing here is I'm sort of drawing the shape of heads. Try not to draw heads as a circle. Have it a little bit more sort of a square with softened edges there. It looks more realistic. So I'm going to add the sort of more middle distant people here. So again, the head is on the horizon, an arched window for the body, W for the legs, and just show where their elbows are, etc. I'm just going to put a couple of people here as well. So this tutorial is not about sort of more foreground people. These are just really for the distant people and the middle ground people. So I hope that makes sense there. And remember, cast shadow grounds them, stops them floating. Another useful little technique of drawing people are M's and W's. We've already done the W for legs. I prefer the arch window, but I've seen this done as well. Squish your M. That M on the left was a little bit too wide. They're going to have super shoulders there. So squish your M at the top, and an M and a W, have them sort of about the same sort of length, and have the W going up inside the M, because usually down to the sort of hips to the legs we're about 50-50 our proportion, and then you've just got the head on top. And it works really well, as you can see I'm doing here, and you can start accessorizing them, giving them a bag, you know, a jacket, skirts, shorts, you know, you can really add to it, give them hair, maybe they're coming towards you or walking away. I've given them a little dog there to, you know, so it's really quite nice to add more details to your people to bring them to life. So now for a little bit more practice. So I think I'll go with the M and W here, but you can just see which ones suit you. But definitely the letter I and the carrots work really well for the distant people. But so here's my M and W here. I'm accessorizing already. Small head, remember, no neck, no hands, no feet, no facial features. So I'm just sketching someone coming the other way now. So the person on the left is walking away, the other person's coming too. I've given this person on the right a skirt, you know, so you're sort of accessorizing. I love sketching with my pen. The pen actually keeps you loose and actually sometimes helps you draw more correctly. I always find with the pencil, you've got the rubber there or the eraser, and you've always got it there to use, and it makes you sort of not look as well. And I would sort of recommend maybe getting a street scene and start sort of applying some of these techniques here. So as you can see here, I'm actually drew the arch window here with a W for legs, and it's so effective. And you can do 2 sticks for the legs as well and paint them in, whatever you fancy, whatever works for you. And maybe you've got some suggestions of how you draw or paint little people. I'd love to hear them, and why not put those in the comments section below. So what I'm doing now is just filling in some colour. It's almost like a colouring book exercise, but you can keep it really, really nice and loose. And the other thing I'm doing is I'm using the leftover paint from my previous tutorial. So waste not, want not. So they're going to have some sort of very interesting clothing here based on a poppy field. But it's quite nice to do that, to keep really loose. You know, I'm in my sketchbook here. I'm just practicing. You know, it's fun to do. You don't have to do this obviously with pen. You can use a pencil if you're putting these in a painting where you're not painting pen and wash. Use a pencil and then fill in exactly the same way I'm filling in here with colour, keeping it really loose. I try to, with my little people, try to do just 2 washes. This first wash here and then a shadow wash, which is a really good way of bringing them to life without giving them too much detail. But as you can see here, I love painting people. That's why I love Sir Hugh Casson's work, the way he paints his people. It's so loose, it's so sketchy. It just brings them to life, just working this way. And I find the more you do this, the better you become. And I know that from teaching students that have literally look at me in horror, think, oh no, we're going to be painting people this week. And then when they start to do it, they feel really more, a lot more confident at the end of the session. And then are willing more to put it into a painting, like a little country lane, and you've got 2 people walking down, maybe walking a dog in the distance. It just brings life to your painting. So I'm actually adding a child here. So a child obviously a lot lower, and that's why they'd be below that horizon line. But just again, adding a little bit more detail. It tells a story. I'm just adding sort of a little bit of blue here, a touch of the dark green. This is all wet on dry, and I'm using my size 4 round black velvet brush. I'm giving this little boy or girl a little red hat as well, just to kind of give it a pop of colour, and of course the very important shadow to ground these people. Another really useful tip is when you're painting people, it's quite small this, but the people on the horizon, keep them more of a greyish blue colour so they recede, and the ones that are coming more nearer the middle ground, just sort of brighter colours and stronger tonal values really works well. Another really good tip is once your painting has dried, try to remind yourself which direction the light's coming from. I always sometimes put a little sun at the top of my masking tape or something, and then an arrow to remind me. So all the shadows then, if the light's coming from the left, all the shadows on the clothing, etc., should be on the right hand side as well as the ground as well. And it just, look at this, just painting a little bit of shadow colour. You could mix ultramarine with cadmium red, watered down, and just glaze that over the right hand side. Simple as that, and that's just wet on dry as well. And it just creates enough detail without sort of over fussing with the painting. It brings the people to life. As promised, I'm showing you what to do if you've painted the head too big. So in this instance here, the head's too big. What I always do when I go around to students is I just get my brush and just make the arch window bigger. Sometimes go over the head, and then you can paint another smaller head on top. In this instance here, I brought the arch window up, cropped the head, and then repainted the head, whatever works. Sometimes the simplest thing is to go over with the arch window and then just place the head on top. I always bring a smile to my students' face when I do that, and sometimes it does rescue a painting, because you've got all these sort of round, large heads which make the people look more like children, because the head sizes of children, the proportions are different to adults. So again, I put my cast shadow in there, and it brings those people to life. My gentleman there does not look like a spaceman anymore. And the lady here, I've decided to give her a ponytail, darken up her coat, and just bring them to life. Just these little bits of details here makes all the difference. And it just really works. So there we are. That's my secret hack. It works every single time, especially when I've helped students. So I really hope you found that helpful. And this short step-by-step tutorial using all the techniques that I've used in this tutorial will be available also on my Patreon membership. So I hope you enjoy it. If you'd like to share your work, remember you can do that on the members Facebook page. Details about that can be found in the description below. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments section below. Thank you so much for being part of the memberships. I really appreciate it. Happy painting. Bye for now.